What's your best, hold on, it gets worse stories? My brother moved to Vermont to work at a ski resort to escape his stressful job in Philly. But before he even started his first day of work, he skied into a tree and had an accident, leaving him unable to work there. He next found a job on a passenger train in Alaska working as a bartender. On one of his days off, he was playing basketball with coworkers and tore his ACL that he had torn years before in high school. After coming home for surgery, he landed a job in Denver. He was mountain biking down a slope and managed to have another accident on a tree, which gave him a major concussion. Days later, his girlfriend and he were having lunch at a restaurant and he lost consciousness, fell out of his seat, and coded. His girlfriend performed CPR until paramedics arrived to take him to the hospital. Fortunately, he was resuscitated. Yikes, that man's a magnet for misfortune. Talk about bad luck over and over and over again. Hopefully, his unlucky streak has ended by now. Story 2. So, two of my friends had a big argument and stopped being friends. I really wanted to know what happened because they used to live together, and it felt like watching parents get a divorce. One friend was always gone, and the other said he didn't know what was going on. After a few months, I finally got to talk to the friend who wasn't around much. He told me everything that happened. He asked if he could date the other friend's cousin, but the other friend said no way. But because the other friend had dated his cousin without asking, he broke the bro code and started seeing her anyway. While dating her, he found out something shocking. She and the other friend weren't just cousins, they had been having a physical relationship for years. They'd been having intimacy like crazy whenever no one was watching. But wait, it gets even crazier. He learned that this had been going on for 10 years. The girl was 22 and her cousin was 24. They'd been having intimacy since they were in middle school. And it gets even more messed up. The girl's dad and her cousins are identical twins, so genetically, they're like half siblings. When I heard all of this, I finished my drink really fast and told my friend I was sorry for asking about it. I wish I had never known. As things turned out, they don't live together anymore and don't talk to each other. I'm still good friends with the friend who isn't involved. I see the other friend sometimes and we're still friends, but it's hard to look him in the eye. Also, the couple who weren't related broke up soon after because he couldn't deal with it. I don't know if the girl is still seeing her cousin or not. I have no words. I wouldn't be able to look that friend in the eye either. Story 3. I came home from work one day and found my fiancé in bed with someone else just 3 months before our wedding. It was a shock and it gets even more complicated. I'm a woman and my ex-fiancé is a man, but the person he was with was also a man. It turned out he had been using me to hide his gender from his family because he was too scared to come out and tell them he was not straight. But it gets even worse. The next day, I went back to get my things. When I tried to leave, he pushed me so that I went through a wall and fell down. It was a terrifying experience, but I'm okay now. That happened a while ago, and now I'm in a very stable, safe, and honest relationship with a wonderful man. Thankfully, he's not cheating on me, and he's not hiding who he is. Okay, I thought the second story was pretty wild, but I realized we're going to be in for a roller coaster of really wild stories, like enough to just shock you through a wall kind of thing. Let's go. Story 4. One Friday night, I came home from work around midnight with a six-pack from my bartending job. My neighbors were having a really loud party. I was new to the apartment complex, but I knew the neighbor and her boyfriend because we used to work together. Instead of complaining about the noise, I decided to join in on the fun. I grabbed 2 drinks and headed over to their place. I knocked on the door expecting my neighbor's boyfriend to answer. Instead, a guy named Jamie opened the door. He was bare with only the door hiding his jimmy, and he was sweaty. I immediately thought I had interrupted something inappropriate and wanted to get out of there. I apologized and quickly made my way back to my apartment. Jamie managed to put on some pants and chase after me. He caught up to me just as I reached my door and said, "Hey, it's okay, you can join us, just please have an open mind." I didn't want any part of this, but I felt obligated to be nice since he was being polite. As I tried to protest, he gently held my wrists and led me back to their apartment, repeating, "Just have an open mind." I was very unhappy about the situation. When we entered the apartment, I was shocked by how dirty it was. The place looked like animals lived there. I thought maybe that's why I needed an open mind because the apartment was so, disgusting. I felt a bit relieved. As Jamie led me around the corner to the kitchen, the amount of filth was overwhelming. The kitchen floor was so dirty that I could barely see it. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. While I was staring at the floor, I heard a voice that sounded like Gollum's from The Lord of the Rings. It said, "Not her, not her." I looked up to see where the voice was coming from. It was my former coworker sitting in the corner of the kitchen, also bare. She was pointing at me with a long, skinny arm, saying, "Not her, not her." I was in shock. It wasn't just her sitting on the floor, her boyfriend was there too. I realized that Jamie had brought me in to join their disgusting agenda. I screamed, "No way, man, not me, you're right about that," and ran back to my apartment. I was pacing in my kitchen, confused and upset, when I heard a loud knock on my door. I yelled, "Get away from me," but the knocking continued. With the door chain in place, I yanked the door open to find Jamie leaning against the door frame saying, "Shelly is really concerned about what you just saw." I don't remember what I screamed at him, but I yelled and then slammed the door shut in his face. Story 5. One time I got my period at school and realized I had forgotten to bring pads with me. It was really awkward, but I had to text my dad to ask him to bring me some. He brought me some to the school office and I picked it up from there. But as soon as I got back to class, I felt something was wrong. I asked to go to the bathroom, and when I checked, it was a disaster. I had leaked a lot. My pants were dark blue, so I thought I could rinse them in the sink and no one would notice they were wet. But I was wrong. The red liquid came out, but the jeans were completely soaked. The bell for the end of the first hour rang while I was still in the bathroom. I had to act fast, so I just soaked my pants entirely and put them back on. They didn't look wet, but it felt awful. I left the bathroom quickly, hoping to find my friend who had gym that day so I could borrow his gym shorts. When I found him, he was confused about why I was asking for his pants. I told him to touch my leg, and when he felt my soaked jeans, he gave me a weird look. I told him not to ask questions, and he gave me his gym shorts. I had to go back to my first period class wearing shorts that were too big and carrying my jeans. I told my teacher I got sick. But it gets worse. During lunch, my friends and I would sit on the ground outside, and I didn't realize I had sat in fresh gum. When I stood up, I felt a breeze. The shorts were stuck to the ground and stretched, basically making me moon everyone at lunch. After all that, I had explained to my friend that his shorts were covered in gum and I'd have to clean them before giving them back. Story 6. A year ago, during the first few weeks of college, my best friend came to visit and tailgate with me and some guys from the opposing school. We knew each other from working at a summer camp. He arrived safely, spent the night at my dorm, and we binge-watched a bunch of Rooster Teeth videos. The next day, while tailgating with our friends, everything was going great. Around 8:30, we were hanging out in my dorm during halftime of the game. The guys we were with had to leave, and we just wanted to chill, so my friend decided to head out early to avoid traffic, too. I offered to walk him to his car, which was parked on the other side of campus in a free parking area. We walked for about 15 to 20 minutes and arrived at the parking lot only to find his car was gone. It was a really nice car, and our first thought was that it had been stolen. We both freaked out, and he started crying while I was panicking, trying to calm him down so we could think clearly. I noticed a sign that said, "No parking on game days without a pass, tow-away zone." I asked him if he had a pass, and he didn't. He was sure he could park there because last time he visited for a football game, someone else parked there without a pass. Realizing the car was probably towed, I called the university police department, but they didn't have the car. They gave me the numbers for the towing services and the town police department. I called around, and after trying several numbers, I finally located the car on the other side of town. We needed a ride, but I didn't have a vehicle at the time. I called a few people I knew, but my brother was hammered, my roommate was at the game, and everyone else was busy or hammered. My friend didn't want to call an Uber, so we decided to walk. It took us about an hour to get to the towing place, walking along the highway and through some sketchy neighborhoods. When we finally arrived, we were relieved to see the car. We paid $200 to get the car released, but then my friend realized he didn't have his keys. He had thrown them down in anger in the original parking lot and never picked them up. Not wanting to walk back, we asked someone at the towing place if they could give us a ride across town for $20. A guy agreed, and we were on our way back. By this time, the college football game was over and everyone was trying to leave town. We were stuck in traffic for an hour, worried that someone might have taken the keys. To make matters worse, our driver's vehicle got into an accident with another truck, which then drove off. The damage wasn't too bad, just a dent, but we had to find the truck because the driver was forcing his way through traffic. Our driver, a muscular redneck, was furious. He got out and threatened the guy to pull over and give us his information. We waited in a bank parking lot for the police to arrive, but they never showed up. After an hour, the guy, who was buzzed, gave our driver $500 and asked him to forget about it. We finally made it back to the parking lot, found the keys, and my friend got a ride back to his car. He managed to get his car and head home. Jokingly, we talked about him getting a ticket on the way back, but thankfully he didn't. My best friend hasn't visited me since. I don't blame him. Story 7. One day, my sister and I were driving around and we decided to stop for some bubble tea and fried chicken. I'd just gotten my driver's license and I was feeling a bit lazy, so I suggested we play a game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who would go inside to buy the food. I won the game, so I moved over to the driver's seat to wait for my sister. However, I had double parked at an active garage, and as our garage door started opening, I made the decision to drive off and double back. This was before the days of GPS, and I wasn't familiar with the area, so I ended up driving around for about 7 blocks. Not seeing an easy way to turn back, I decided to make a U turn on a busy main road at night. You can probably guess what happened next. I pulled over and waited for a chance to make the U turn. When I finally saw an opening, I pressed the gas, but instead of making a clean U turn, I heard a loud screeching noise and the sound of metal ripping. It turned out there was a car in my blind spot, and I had completely shredded the passenger side of their car with my reckless move. I jumped out of the car, and so did the lady from the other car. In a full-on panic, I told her that the car was my sister's and that I needed to get her from the coffee shop a few blocks away. Without waiting for a response, I left the car and ran back to the store. Out of breath, I told my sister that I had gotten into an accident, and she hurried back to the scene with me. It turned out that the poor lady had just picked up her car from the dealership. The plates weren't even on yet, and she was only 2 blocks away from home. Talk about bad luck. But there's more to the story. In my hurry and panic, I had forgotten to turn off the headlights of my sister's car, draining the battery. We had to call my aunt to come and jumpstart the car since neither of us had jumper cables. As if that wasn't enough, I then accidentally spilled the bubble tea all over the driver's seat. Needless to say, my sister was not happy that day. The police never showed up, and we ended up waiting for 2 hours before going to the precinct to file a report. To top it all off, we left the fried chicken back at the bubble tea place. It was a day filled with mishaps and unfortunate events. Story 8. 2 years ago, I was at my parents' house spending time with my son and dad. We were walking around their property when my dad asked me to move a wheelbarrow from behind some shrubs. I turned around for just a moment, and in that brief instant, my son was gone. He had vanished in literally 10 seconds. My dad and I looked at each other with concern, not knowing where he could have gone. The scary part was that we were only about 20 feet away from their pond. My son was a child at the time and definitely not good at swimming. I panicked and sprinted to the edge of the water, screaming his name. Without hesitation, I jumped into the pond, frantically searching for him and calling out his name. The thought of it now makes me feel nauseous. I never experienced terror like that before. Suddenly, I heard my mom yell and saw that she had my son with her. In the second it took me to move the wheelbarrow, he had run to her behind a retaining wall, and my dad and I hadn't noticed. I climbed out of the water, tears streaming down my face, and ran to him. That's when I realized I had hurt my foot on something underwater. My phone, which was in my pocket, was completely soaked and destroyed. The wound on my foot was serious, so I immediately went to urgent care. After paying $50, the wound was cleaned out, but it couldn't be stitched due to its location. The process of digging pond mud out of the wound for 20 minutes was excruciatingly painful. After leaving urgent care, I hobbled with my wife to the Verizon store where we spent over 2 hours getting everything transferred to a new phone. Another $200 or so later, I was ready to go home, exhausted and in pain. When we arrived at our old house, I tried to unlock the front door, but the lock literally spun in place. The locking mechanism had sheared off, choosing the worst day of my life to malfunction. We waited about another 2 hours for a locksmith, but he couldn't get in, so we drove 30 minutes back to my parents' house to stay there for the night. The next morning, I woke up with an aching foot and drove home to meet the locksmith. Unfortunately, I had to climb through a balcony door to get into our bedroom, which was 15 feet up a ladder. With my injured foot, it was a challenging climb, but luckily the door was opened. Once inside, I gathered my things and headed to Lowe's to get a replacement lock, which cost $150 since the old one couldn't be fixed. There was also a $75 service call from the locksmith. As I left the store and got on the highway, I encountered yet another problem, a flat tire. It was mid-July, humid and 100 degrees outside. With my injured foot, I was stuck on the side of a busy highway. When I tried to jack up the car, the jack buckled because the ground wasn't level. I ended up paying $100 for a service call to have it fixed. The tow truck guy was amazing, which helped ease the situation a little bit. To top it all off, my wife was 8.5 months pregnant at the time. The only thing that could have made the day worse was if she had gone into labor while I was stranded on the side of the road. It was one day filled with one mishap after another, testing my limits and patience. Story 9. When I was in college, Snoop Dogg came to perform at our campus. His team asked for his dressing room to be set up with couches, a TV, and an Xbox 360. We were able to do that. We took the couches and TV from our university coffee shop, and the Xbox 360 was loaned to us by a student on the events team. After Snoop finished his show and left, we were taking the couches back to the coffee shop when the student who loaned the Xbox 360 came running in, panicked. He asked if we had seen the system, but we hadn't. He checked everywhere in the dressing room, under the couch cushions, and all around, but it was nowhere to be found. It seemed like the Xbox 360 had been accidentally packed up with Snoop's stuff. We tried calling his team over and over, but we couldn't get through because they were out clubbing or something. So Snoop Dogg ended up accidentally taking some kid's Xbox 360. I thought that was hilarious, and it became my go-to story whenever Snoop Dogg came up in conversation. But since it seemed like an accident and I didn't want to spread any rumors about him, I stopped telling the story after a while. A few guys later, I was in a friend's basement when another friend came in and said, "Guys, you won't believe this, but Snoop Dogg played a show at my friend's college and he stole his PS4. I almost passed out laughing. It turned out that Snoop Dogg had a habit of accidentally taking gaming systems from college students. It was too funny to be a coincidence." Story 10. Back in April, on my birthday, my family came over for dinner and for cake. Everyone was there: my sister, her husband, my niece, my parents, my brother, his then fiance, and my girlfriend. We were having a nice time eating hoagies, or subs from those not from Philly, when my niece decided to jump on the couch. My sister quickly headed over to stop her, but my niece slipped on the coffee table. My sister yelped and scooped up her daughter. My niece was crying, and my sister was trying to calm her down. Everything was quiet for a moment, and then my sister screamed. She rushed into the kitchen, and I looked at my niece's head. We all panicked as my sister hyperventilated. I quickly soaked up the red liquid with a paper towel and noticed that there was only a very tiny wound. She didn't even need stitches. My father grabbed some ice and a rag and put pressure on the wound. My brother-in-law took my sister and niece to the hospital while the rest of us cleaned up a bit before heading over. As we were cleaning, my dog decided he wanted a hoagie. I glanced over to the table and saw his face slowly reaching for one. We all noticed and ran over to stop him, but the hoagie was already gone with only scraps remaining. While we were cleaning up those scraps, my dog walked back into the kitchen, looked at us, and then made a mess on the floor. Of course. Story 11. I went on a Tinder date once with a guy from the Naval Academy near where I used to live. He seemed sweet enough, and I was questioning my gender at the time, so I thought, why not? He seems nice. I met him at the mall and we got lunch. The first thing I noticed was that he was wearing a fedora. I decided to ignore it for the moment. During lunch, he started making comments about how he was glad I had an eating disorder, saying, "It works for me." I thought maybe he just didn't understand eating disorders. After we finished eating, or rather after he finished, he linked arms with me and started dragging me around the mall. All the while, he talked about how much of a nice guy he was and how he never got women or got laid because of it. He went on about his Navy buddies were all getting hot girls and using them because they weren't nice like he was. He also said I probably wouldn't be the type they'd go for because I'm not hot enough, but he's such a nice guy. He likes girls like me. By this point, I was just trying to get through the date while being dragged around the mall. Then he went into Spencer's and he bought yet another fedora. This one had little rhinestones or something sparkly on it, and it looked like something a grade A would wear. I was done. I couldn't do this anymore. As I was contemplating how to escape, he came up and began to tell me that once we were together, he expected me to trim my hair because it's disgusting. But of course, he would keep his because he is a man. And I was completely done. I faked a faint, which isn't that hard when you're starving, and got my mom to pick me up. As I was leaving, he took off the fedora he came in with, gave it to me, and sent me on my way. I immediately unmatched him on Tinder and deleted any connections I had with him. For now, that was the end of it. But about a month later, I got a message from someone on Facebook. It was him asking for his fedora back. I still have it. I think I'm doing him a favor by keeping it. Never, never, ever ignore the fedora as a red flag. Once you see that, just turn around and walk the same way you came from. Alright, so if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 12. I was married for 6 months to my husband, who I had been supporting through a lot of mental health issues while also trying to do grad school. One day, he realized that he is not straight. I took a leave of absence from school and got a job so that I could start supporting myself. We started going to couples therapy. She was determined to start hormone replacement therapy, HRT. We decided to separate when our lease was up, and as far as I was concerned, life might as well be over. That was during the winter. The following spring, I finally convinced an urgent care doctor that the debilitating pain I experienced once a month to the point where I couldn't stand up straight wasn't normal. He ordered a CT scan, and the next day I found out I had ovarian tumors. I was referred to an oncologist, and after an unsuccessful biopsy and 2 weeks of uncertainty, I had an up-down open laparotomy and discovered that it was endometriosis. So, I don't have cancer, but I do have an incurable, barely treatable chronic disease that will cause me pain until menopause and probably after. Also, my soon to be ex refused to come to the hospital because she didn't want to deal with my parents, and while I was recovering, talked nonstop about how awesome estrogen was supposed to be. In the span of a year, I went from being a happily married grad student to a divorced, barren, depressed dropout. I want to add that all this happened several years ago. Since then, I've had 2 more open surgeries. The poroscopes are great, but I grow big cysts that can't be removed that way. I've also had an appointment with a fertility specialist where a very nice doctor used an ultrasound probe in a very uncomfortable place for a very long time. Both the fertility specialist and my surgeon agree that having babies is not going to happen. My uterus is lifted and absolutely covered in scar tissue. Even if I could miraculously conceive, trying to carry to term would be really dangerous. Also, I'm approaching my late 30s, past the age where I would even try to have a kid. I made my peace with it a long time ago. Story 13. I was madly in love with my last girlfriend. We were in a long-distance relationship, as in different continents long distance, but she was so adamant about being with me that I jumped in with both feet and committed completely. After about a year, she just snapped and dumped me over Skype. A week before, she was supposed to visit me on a ticket I paid for, and 3 weeks before we were to go on vacation with her family. So, on top of the heartache, I had $1,000 in useless plane tickets. I was depressed and deeply unhappy. It gets worse. 5 months later, I had an accident and got a concussion and a whiplash injury. I was out sick from my job for 6 months. Then, all of a sudden, she texts me and says she still loves me. She flies to my country to get me back. I should have known what would happen, but I still loved her, so I forgave her and took her back. I started to trust her again. 6 months went by, and then she started to act weird. She says we have problems we need to talk about. She said that as a pretext to emotionally mistreat me for a week, telling me the most hurtful things imaginable. Then she broke up with me 3 weeks before a planned Christmas vacation with her parents. That time, now I had useless plane tickets for $2,000. Now, between that heartache and my whiplash, I was really down and had to fight to get out of bed every morning. This resulted in my boss firing me for having a bad attitude. And it gets worse. I now find out from a friend that my ex got a new boyfriend almost immediately after she dumped me, and that she knew him while she was with me. So you can guess what happened there. Story 14. You know how everyone has that one party story? The one that, no matter how hard you try, will never be topped? Well, I'm a second-year college student who attends a university that likes to go by the mantra of work hard, play hard, and this is that story. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to a pretty big annual event at my school that had a reputation of having a pretty wild after party. My buddy, let's call him Dewey, had just finished his semester and I hadn't, so he was pretty bored back in our hometown. I figured that since he had nothing to do back at home, I would bring him to the after party and he could sleep back at my dorm for the night, have a good time and all that, and we did. We had a fantastic time. Even made it back to my dorm in one piece somehow. I thought we just went back and slept, but apparently some serious stuff went down after the party that I didn't hear about until later, and by then there was nothing I could do except laugh and think, there's no way that happened. So fast forward to the morning after, it's windy outside, and Dewey and I are sitting at a dining hall having some delicious hangover food. Suddenly this conversation comes up. Dude, I did something last night. What'd you do? Something bad? Dewey, what the hell did you do? Then he tells me what actually happened that night after we left the party. Apparently, I was too blacked out to remember, but he definitely wasn't. And once he started recalling the story, I began to remember the show that transpired afterwards. To this day, whenever I tell this story, people don't believe me until I show them, but I'll get to that later. So we leave the party, stumble our way back to the dorm, and get into the elevator since I live on the 7th floor. We got out of the elevator without incident and kind of just plopped down in my floor's lounge, which was thankfully empty. Seems all right. But then Dewey retches up. Everywhere. On the couch, on the study tables, on the floor, on the walls even. No surface was safe from his wrath. And at this point, I'm already disgusted and thinking, oh no, he's gonna be my guest, so I'm responsible for this. Oh man, housing probation, here I come. But then it got worse. It got so much worse. After the wretch apocalypse, he then says he has to go. So I hand him my ID card so he can swipe into the bathroom, which I should mention is a mere 20 feet away from us. But he turns me down and says, nah, man, I gotta go now, like right now, and it's gonna be a big one. Dewey then opens my lounge window, sticks it out, and proceeds to release the Kraken all over the side of my precious dormitory building. And when I say release the Kraken, I mean it. He finishes unleashing his unholy sewage all over the side of my building while I sit there, just agape but too hammered to do anything about it. Then we nonchalantly stroll back to my room and promptly pass out. Now back to the present. I'm horrified, disgusted. Never in my life would I have imagined I would be privy to anything like this. But what's done is done, right? Who cares? No harm done, right? Wrong. I make my way back to my building and ride the elevator up so that I can relax and nurse my hangover. In the elevator, I hear this conversation between two girls. I can't believe someone did that to our lounge. Yeah, that's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. It smelled pretty bad in there, too. The cleaning lady says it's either a really bad throw-up or something way worse. Do they know who did it? I don't know, but they must have been living higher up to get to floor 4. At least it didn't get inside or anything. Now, I'm curious and I think I know exactly what happened. So I get off on the 4th floor, enter their lounge, and lo and behold, I see this masterpiece. Yep, it's Dewey's mess smeared all over the window of the lounge 3 floors below me. Apparently, some people were peacefully studying at 3 in the morning the night that this mess went down when all of a sudden, wham, Dewey's mess slammed into their window, hard enough to make the glass shake. The wind must have hurled it sideways, mid-descent, causing his work of art to splatter onto their window with a resounding thud. I took one good look and smell, snapped the picture, and flee to my room practically passing out from laughter. Then I tell pretty much all of our friends back at home because, come on, how do you not tell everyone about that? I didn't tell any of my college friends, though. I don't need that kind of mess on my hands, and for good reason. Admin heard about it and basically put out a warrant for the capture of whoever did the deed or for anyone who helped them do it. I basically had to be on my toes for the rest of the semester in fear of being charged as an assistant to this assailant of justice. People from other dorms eventually heard about it and began sullying the good name of my building, calling it Mess Central and other hilarious names. They didn't just forget about him either. For the rest of the year, the Phantom Messer became something of a legend. No one knew who it was, but they knew what he did and what he's capable of. His legacy lives on, in me, in you, but mostly in the mess smears he left trailing down the side of my dormitory. Those are a little bit harder to wash off. This seems like it could be like a prequel to the Hangover series, with all the snaps at the end of the movie during the end credits scene. Good stuff. Story 15. I was best friends with the girl for 10 years. She got a new boyfriend who was pretty chill, and the 3 of us hung out a lot. Well, she gradually started changing and became more and more short with me, to the point where nearly everything she said to me was passive-aggressive. This went on for a couple months. I tried talking to her, but she wouldn't admit anything was wrong. So one day, she acted especially hostile while we were out with friends, and I took off because I was done dealing with it for the night. I sent her a pretty long text trying to lay out what she did and said to me that really hurt me. I told her how she had been changing and how uncomfortable I was with how she was treating me. She had her mom respond to me. We're both adults. But wait, it gets worse. 3 weeks went by with no contact. I saw her at a restaurant when I joined our friends for dinner. She wouldn't even talk to me, just glared at me. I went home that night and called a friend to confide in, and she told me that my best friend had been telling everyone we know that I am intentionally trying to break up her relationship because I want her boyfriend. I was shocked, mostly because this never came up and also because I had no interest in her boyfriend. I was and am still mentally damaged over an ex of my own. I have no interest in dating anyone, especially my best friend's boyfriend. So I tried talking to her and she acted like it was all true. She told me that she was faultless in this and that I was a manipulative little princess. I just wanted her to stop treating me badly for no reason, but hindsight is 2020. She won't speak to me now and dislikes me because her relationship fell apart due to her being a massive witch and demanding her BF not hang out with me at all, even though we work together and have the same friend group. 10 years, all down the drain. Story 16. This is the true story of my ex and I and why I decided to ditch America and live abroad. So my ex-fiancée, let's call her Emily, was always jealous of my best friend, let's call her Jenny. Emily was jealous of every woman who came in contact with me at work, in my neighborhood, and so on, but I had a long platonic relationship with Jenny, and I wasn't willing to stop being friends with her. I sometimes snuck off for drinks with Jenny, but I never cheated. It wasn't even on my mind. Anyway, I came home from one of these drinking nights to discover that Emily had hacked my email password and saw my emails making plans to meet Jenny. That night, Emily tried to end herself. But oh, it gets worse. We had a huge argument, but things calmed down and we tried to return to normalcy. Nope, one night while playing card games with some friends at our place, I dropped a card under the table and realized that Emily and another friend were playing footsies under the table. It wasn't until he put his hand on her thigh that I put my cards down and heard him. This friend, let's call him Chad, was a big source of comfort for Emily while she and I were patching things up. Sometimes they came home at dawn, but I was asking Emily to trust me with Jenny. I could certainly extend that trust to Chad. Anyway, days later, Chad threatened to file charges, but mutual friends talked him out of it. But oh, it gets worse. At the time, I was living in a 2-story home with my best friend from college and his own fiancée. They took the top floor and Emily and I and my dog took the bottom. My best friend kept his cats on the second floor because I'm terribly allergic to cats, but he saw his chance. He asked me to move out so I could take my dog. His reasoning, oh, Emily's from Ohio and your mom's relatively close by. You could go back to your mom, but Emily can't just pick up and leave. I severed contact with him immediately and never looked back. And yes, but oh, it gets worse. A week goes by and I'm completely miserable, but then comes Emily's phone call. She had a miscarriage. She had no idea she was even pregnant. I now know that I dodged a huge one, but at the time, I was a mess of emotions. Whose was it? I asked Emily. She tells me she doesn't know. But yes, it gets worse. Emily's mom drives up to my mom's place from Ohio to New York, knocking and screaming at our front door, threatening that she's going to sue for mental anguish leading to the miscarriage. I decided I had enough of America and that I needed to go to explore the world and just learn how to enjoy things again. So now I'm in Japan. Yeah, people with huge trust issues like that seem to be the people you can trust the least. They're just projecting their misdeeds on other people. Story 17. I got pregnant through IVF, but the baby passed away at 6 months. My husband and I decided to pursue Chinese adoption, but both parents had to be 30. I was 30, my husband was 28. Sigh, great, more waiting. I started working on the mountain of necessary paperwork involved, even though I was still grieving the loss of my daughter. I had all the paperwork organized in a huge plastic portable file. The file was in my car, and as I was going to get stuff notarized after work, while I was at work, my car was stolen. Yep, the car with all my paperwork. Paperwork that included our social security numbers and all our tax returns. 2 days later, the car was found, a total loss. Luckily, the paperwork was there. I had a bag full of birthday gifts for my nieces and nephews in the trunk, not visible from the outside. As I was going to drop them off at my sister's, you guessed it, the thieves took the gifts. The only thing they left behind was the adoption paperwork and a Bible. So I got a new car the following week, and one night a cop pulled me over. He claimed I didn't come to a complete stop at a stop sign, but I seriously did. He asked for my insurance info, but I left it on the kitchen counter as I had just gotten this new car the day before. I explained the situation, but he was a snob and still gave me a sizable ticket. Several months passed, and I was almost done completing all the adoption paperwork. Yay. I wake up in the morning to get ready to ship it all to the consulate, and I see that my cat had jumped onto the kitchen island and literally shredded our marriage certificate. There was no way to even tape it together. The even bigger problem is that we got married in Jamaica, so we had to contact the Jamaican government to get a certified copy. This delayed the adoption process by several more months. Throughout all of this, I'm still grieving the daughter I lost, and it felt like everything was going wrong. I just couldn't catch a break. This was in 2003. Flash forward to now, and we are the proud parents of our two incredible daughters from China. All the pain and aggravation had a happy ending. Story 18. Now, keep in mind that I'm a tall, fat man with horrible emotional challenges. I started biking around instead of driving to help deal with both of these issues. About 10 years ago, I met a girl online. We chatted, we had fun, and we spent 9 years together online doing all we could with a very long distance relationship. We decided to get married, and I started the process of immigration into the States. After spending nearly $4,000, well over $5K if you included her last plane ticket and various amounts throughout the years, she decides to say, "Yeah, I'm marrying this person I met 3 weeks ago. Bye," and she's gone. I was devastated. I still think to this day that I'm going to pass away alone. I was seriously considering ending it all and looking at ways to do it. Then, 3 days later, 3 whole days, I get home and find that someone had stolen my $400 bike, which was originally $1,000 but was badly damaged in shipping and then fixed up, off of my second floor balcony. I put it on my credit card thinking that it would save me money on gas and pay for itself eventually, which would be true, and make me feel better, which was also true. So the only person I've ever had a real relationship with, or so I thought, leaves me, and I get robbed of one of the other things that actually made me feel alive and human, all in the same week. I seriously don't know how I'm still alive. The 1 year anniversary of that is in a few weeks. I need a drink. Story 19. I lived on the first floor of my apartment complex in Central Florida. I moved in about 2 months ago and had to furnish the apartment ourselves. Hurricane Irma comes and passes over. We didn't lose power, AC, or internet and cable. Late Monday afternoon, I went to check out my car because there are no covered lots in my complex. The water level is up to the bottom of the doors, but I didn't want any to get inside, so I left it. I go back inside, chill, take a nap, and wake up around 6:30. Water is coming through my living room door. I throw down towels and it seems to stop the flow. I start getting stuff off the floor and packing, just throwing essentials in bags and putting everything as high as it will go at this point. Water starts coming through the wall in the closet. I go back out to check out the towels in the living room, but they've been compromised and water is freely flowing through the door. Finally, I get my stuff together and climb out through the window so I don't let more water through the door. I hop in my girlfriend's car and head to a friend's house for the night. I come back the next morning to salvage what we can. The water is knee deep. I'm about 6'2" in the parking lot leading to my apartment. I get back into the apartment and it's ankle deep throughout. Couches are trash, bed frame and mattress are trashed. Desk, TV stand, and bookshelf are all trashed. Of course, renter's insurance doesn't cover flooding. As I'm carrying out what we can save, I look across a parking lot and there's my car with water up to the door handles. I look inside and the water level is covering the seats. Story 20. This one is courtesy of a friend. Friend was looking for online marketing jobs in the city. Despite having limited online marketing experience herself, she did some work for her brother's company in this space for maybe a little less than a year and threw her resume out there. She gets a call back from a small firm and sets up an interview with a man named Sean who happened to be the owner and CEO. Super small company. So she goes to the interview and he asks her about her past online marketing experience. She goes into her past experience, but not wanting to say it was her brother's company that she worked for. She tells Sean that it was her brother's friend's company. The rest of the interview goes well and she leaves. On the way home, however, and into the evening, she starts thinking back over the interview and starts to feel bad that she had lied about whose company she had actually worked for because she's an overly honest soul and starts to worry that if she gets hired, the truth will come out and put her into a tight spot later. Eventually, her guilt gets the better of her and she emails the interviewer Sean to confess her lie. "Dear Paul," she writes, "I'm just writing to inform you that during the interview when I told you I worked for my brother's friend's company, I lied. It was actually my brother's company. I hope this doesn't impact my prospects as a candidate for this offer. Send." She looks back over the email. Oh my God, his name is Sean. I wrote, "Dear Paul." Oh my God. So she sends a second email. "Dear Sean, I didn't mean to address you as Paul. Sorry." No response. A few days later, she was turned down. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.